Hello everyone and good evening. My name's Don Arleth and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw. Central and Eastern Europe is observing two presidential elections this evening. In Romania, the polls have just closed in the final runoff, and we're awaiting results. Meanwhile, here in Poland, the polls remain open until 9 p.m., when the first exit polls are expected later tonight. We'll have more on those elections in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Russia shows no signs of ending the war as it launches its largest drone attack since 2022. Pope Leo XIV holds inaugural Mass as new pontiff. And Austria's JJ has won the 69th Eurovision Song Contest in Basel. We start off tonight with elections in Romania. Pro-EU presidential candidate and mayor of Bucharest, Nicușor Dan, seems to be leading in the exit polls. Have Romanians rejected the anti-EU, anti-Ukraine candidate George Simion, choosing to stay on the path of supporting Ukraine and the European Union? Now let's go to our Balkans correspondent, Pavel Chaskovsky, for the latest. Good evening, Pavel. So is it fair to say that Simion has been defeated?
Well, we have to be careful about that, Don, because, well, yes, the voting stations have just closed and the first exit polls results are coming through. And according to these exit polls, it is Bucharest mayor, centrist politician Nicușor Dan, who emerges victorious from the presidential runoff, securing about 55% of the vote, 10 percentage points more than ultra-nationalist George Simion. However, the exit polls results typically do not include the votes of Romanian diaspora. Romanian diaspora that in the first round of presidential elections voted predominantly for George Simion, apart from the Romanians in Moldova, whose majority of votes went to Nicușor Dan. So, as the voters' turnout in diaspora is reported to be significantly higher than in the first round, these votes could eventually sway the final results, and we will have to wait until early morning hours of Monday for the final vote count. And as we are talking about voters' turnout today in Romania, it exceeded 60%, and ahead of this presidential runoff, many experts indicated that such turnout would actually benefit Nicușor Dan. Nicușor Dan, who ahead of the first round of presidential elections had his constituency mostly in big cities. I actually attended a polling station. I was at the polling station today in Bucharest, and when I asked people about today's vote, they seemed to suggest that they actually voted for Nicușor Dan. Please listen.
I voted against the injustices done to the Romanian people. I voted against the inequities and humiliations to which our brothers and sisters have been subjected, both here within the current borders and everywhere. I voted against abuses and against poverty. I voted against those who disregard us all, but at the same time I voted for our future to be decided only by Romanians, for Romania. May God help us.
That was actually George Simion, Nicușor Dan opponents, and that's what he said upon casting his vote. But I would like you to listen to people I talked to today, people who cast their votes in Bucharest, the capital of Romania. Please, let's try again.
I think the freedom is the perfect word for what we want in this moment.
To keep on European trajectory.
In Europe, and in good relations with all international partners.
For the candidate to be able to speak at least in Romanian language fluently and correctly, and to be civilized with other people. I'm not hoping for the Queen Mary of Romania to be alive again, but at least that.
And ahead of presidential elections, as I mentioned, Nicușor Dan's constituency was mostly in the big cities, and this is why he sought to broaden his appeal, broaden his constituency. This is also why today he voted in the countryside. Please listen.
I voted from here, from Făgăraș, because it is important to convey to people that it is important to know where we came from, and because it is important that there are not two Romanias. One of the big cities, and one of the rural areas and small towns. We must distribute prosperity everywhere in Romania.
So let me reiterate, according to the exit polls results, it is Nicușor Dan who emerges victorious from the presidential runoff in Romania, a clear sign that Romanians want to stay on the pro-European, pro-Ukrainian path. However, we will have to wait for the final vote count because exit polls do not include the votes of Romanian diaspora. Back to you, Don.
Okay, Paweł Trzaskowski reporting for us there in Bucharest. Thank you very much. Now to the Polish presidential election, not here in Poland, but in countries all over the world, where Polish expatriates have been flocking to polling stations to cast their votes. Let's go to our correspondent, Alex Cardier, who is in London and has the latest on the Polish community voting abroad.
Well, polls opened here in London at 7 o'clock local time. That's 8 o'clock in Warsaw. But this is absolutely a global moment for Polish democracy, the Polish community around the world casting their votes. In fact, in the Americas, those polls opened a day earlier on Saturday. The very first place where Polish people were able to cast their vote was in the Argentinian capital of Buenos Aires, followed by the Brazilian cities of Brasilia, of Sao Paulo, and then to the very eastern tip of Canada in Halifax, Nova Scotia. An hour later in Chile, in the Dominican Republic, in Cuba, in Venezuela, and then other parts of the United States and the city of Toronto in Canada. The last polling stations will close also on the American continent, showing that this is clearly a very global day for Polish democracy. Around 43,000 voters registered to vote in the United States of America, mostly, of course, in the cities of New York and Chicago. You can see here in London as well a very big Polish community, very much turning up and turning out for these elections. Polls will close at 9 p.m. and, of course, very strict rules about campaigning, about the promotion of political material are in force. You have to respect the electoral silence, and you can see that at this polling station. No campaigning, just people lining up to cast their vote in an orderly manner. So clearly, this election day going pretty smoothly here in London, and this global reach of the Polish community showing up for this important moment for Polish democracy. We've spoken to some people here in London about what it meant to them. One lady, a teacher in an international school, told us how important it was for her that this will help the future generations of Poland. Let's have a listen.
You know, I'm a teacher. I teach in an international school. I teach students from many different countries, and they can see how privileged we are that we can actually vote and we can have an influence on who is going to rule our country and in which direction our country will go.
Well, a global day for Polish democracy with a potential impact for future generations as well, as you can hear. Certainly a moment for Polish people around the world, the community around the UK, around Europe, around the Americas to step up and step forward to cast their vote. A moment in history for Polish elections, for Polish politics and the future of Polish democracy. In London, I'm Alex Cardier for TVP World.
And here in Poland, we're still under election silence until the last polls close at 9 p.m. tonight. Here on TVP World, we'll have a special edition dedicated to the Polish presidential election starting after World News tonight at 8:40. Now let's go to our chief political correspondent, Aaron Dahmen, who will tell us more about the turnout in today's election.
Good evening, Don. Well, the final countdown is on. First exit polls coming out at 9 o'clock CET here on TVP World, and we will have the very latest. As you say, we can't talk about the candidates, we can't talk about what they stand for, but we can talk about this. So, those first exit polls, like I say, coming out at 9 o'clock, and as of 5 o'clock this evening, 50.69% have gone to the polls. That's according to the National Electoral Commission. These are still incomplete figures, but let's compare them to the last presidential election in 2020 and, of course, the general election of 2023 in the middle there, which saw a record turnout. So we can expect that today's numbers will keep rising. They are on track for a pretty high turnout. And remember, if no candidate gets more than 50% majority in this first round, the top two will head to a final face-off on the 1st of June. So, Don, it is all to play for. You'll be able to, see these turnout numbers, but also see the figures, the latest exit polls, the data. They will all be right here on the screen at 9 o'clock. And you can join me and my colleague Claudia Czerwinska at 9.
All right, Aaron Dahmen, looking forward to that. Of course, pivotal elections here taking place not only in Romania, but also in Poland. Of course, we're all waiting for that. Aaron, thank you very much. Now, while we're still waiting on polls to close here in Poland, our correspondent Konrad Gorliński took to the streets of Warsaw today to ask voters about what was the most important to them when choosing Poland's next president. Take a look.
However, I would like to have a president who, can speak languages.
From my perspective, economics would be the most crucial aspect of giving a vote, of voting. And secondly, our safety.
For me as a young person, I think my biggest issue right now is buying my own apartment or house. So I really wanted to vote for someone who I believe would really focus on that problem.
Unity, the nation, this is for most important for us.
Dear sir, tranquility, simply tranquility, and simply, I think, some relative equality among citizens. That's all.
Moving on now, ahead of a planned Monday phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, Russia launched the biggest drone strike on the country since 2022. A record 273 drones hit Ukraine overnight, killing at least one person and injuring several others. Now we turn to our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee. Good evening, Oz. So what is the immediate consequences of the unprecedented drone attack for Kyiv, and how is this shaping the expectations ahead of the Trump-Putin call that's expected to take place tomorrow?
Well, it does indicate that the Russians are far from running out of steam here. In fact, they have escalated their attacks, their bombardment of Ukrainian cities since the start of this peace process initiated by Donald Trump's White House. Really, the attacks have escalated. There have been major bombings, large casualty events, week in, week out. These are regular occurrences. One person killed in these drone attacks, but it is the largest of the war so far, 273 Russian drones launched on the territory of Ukraine, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. Now, this comes, as you rightly said, ahead of potential talks with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Now, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz confirmed that he would be also speaking to Donald Trump before that conversation, alongside the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, and the French President Emmanuel Macron. So really high-level diplomacy about to happen on Monday. The question is, will it result in anything? So far, all of these efforts of mediation between Washington and Moscow have resulted in very little. In fact, more than very little. It's resulted in continuous attacks against the Ukrainian people, with very little in the way of condemnation coming from Washington. Now, President Zelensky is currently in Rome, where he met with J.D. Vance, the US Vice President. They certainly seem to have a much more productive conversation than the last time they met. President Zelensky saying, following the meeting, I reaffirmed that Ukraine is ready to be engaged in real diplomacy and underscored the importance of a full and unconditional ceasefire as soon as possible. So, look, a big week ahead for the Ukrainians. They don't expect that anything is going to come out of these talks between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. What they are really looking for is, if there is nothing that comes out of these talks, what will the pressure coming from Washington be on Moscow? They're certainly hoping for that promise of further sanctions that was supposed to be enacted when Russia failed to implement a ceasefire on Monday. Now, we've been a week later, the Ukrainians are really going to be looking for progress to be made on the sanctions issue. Back to you in the studio, Don.
Oz Chatterjee reporting for us from Kyiv. Thank you for that report. Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope, began his papacy with a call for unity and compassion during his inaugural Mass. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky was the first world leader to meet with the new pope. Zelensky also met with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. The two had their first face-to-face meeting since that blow-up in the White House in February. During the Mass, Pope Leo expressed desire for the Vatican to serve as a bridge for peace, particularly in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Leo XIV, previously known as Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, has officially begun his papal reign as the head of the Catholic Church. Thousands of faithful flocked to St. Peter's Square in Vatican to witness the ceremonial Mass.
It's a lot of emotion. It's a great blessing because we've been suffering for more than 2 years, and this Pope, in one way or another, has brought us emotion, a relief.
He'll make a wonderful Pope. I like how emotional and kind he is. I love his background.
Numerous world leaders were also in attendance, with many using the inauguration as an opportunity to meet with other heads of state. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, making it their first face-to-face meeting following their tense encounter in the Oval Office in February. Pope Leo XIV has previously criticized Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, taking a much stronger stance than his predecessor, who was hesitant to condemn Russia.
We already found many videos speaking about the issues as a cardinal, who really condemned, without any doubts, the full-scale invasion on Ukraine as a form of Russian imperialism.
Pope Leo is the first leader of the Catholic Church to have used personal social media accounts prior to his inauguration, making his views on various matters readily accessible. But now that he has taken reign of the Holy See, Leo XIV may no longer be able to speak in such direct terms.
I think that the Pope is mostly aligned with the West, but of course, in the Vatican terms, he could not completely go beyond political terms. He has always to have an humanitarian surface that is always priority for the Vatican.
Pope Leo has already offered the Vatican as the place for future Ukraine-Russia peace talks following Putin's no-show in Istanbul.
And now to Europe's most popular song contest. Poland had pinned all of its hopes on Justyna Stęczkowska in the 2025 Eurovision Song Contest. It was the Polish star's second attempt after first entering the competition in 1995. In the event, though, it was Austria that claimed the crown in a nail-biting vote that knocked Israel off of the top spot. There was one positive note, though, for Poland, as John Todd now reports.
Austria's JJ shouts with delight as he's crowned the Eurovision Song Contest winner for 2025. It was a close-run battle against Israel going down to the wire, but the 24-year-old singer from Vienna won through after the audience poll pushed Israel off the top spot, securing his country's third victory in the competition. JJ was overwhelmed when the audience started chanting for Austria.
That was crazy. I actually filmed it on my phone and I already started breaking out in tears. That was so surreal to hear everyone chanting you as the winner, and the fact that we made it is, insane.
The professional opera singer is a countertenor at the Vienna State Opera. His entry, Wasted Love, combined elements of opera, techno, and high-pitched vocals in a song about unrequited love. Israel's Yuval Raphael placed second with New Day Will Rise, while the quirky Espresso Macchiato by Estonia's Tommy Cash came third. Poland's Justyna Stęczkowska came in 14th with her song Gaia. Experts say that while her performance scored well with audiences, national juries were less impressed, a challenge that many artists face.
Europe is really divided into several different culture zones, and something we like doesn't have to be, I don't know, respected or liked by juries in other countries. So it is always difficult to write a song which is loved by everyone.
Commentators have highlighted one Polish positive from the night: how the composer Wojciech Kostrzewa played a key role in JJ's success.
I'd like to congratulate to Wojciech Kostrzewa, who is the producer of the Austrian song. This is his second victory in a row. This is a very good Polish composer and conductor from Warsaw.
For now, it's time for Austria to enjoy JJ's victory, as other countries lick their wounds and set about finding that elusive winning song for next year. John Todd for TVP World.
Now for an all-night learning experience, and no, I'm not talking about crunching for exams. Since 2004, Warsaw's long night of museums has turned the city into a cultural hub for one magical evening. On May 17th, over 300 venues from major museums to hidden archives opened their doors for free. Around 300,000 people explored art, history, and rarely seen spaces guided by passionate volunteers. Here's more.
On this special night, museums lift the curtain on their secrets, showing treasures that usually remain hidden throughout the year.
Well, it feels very special. It feels very exclusive, almost VIP. It's very nice to be able to see the backstage areas that aren't available every day.
At the National Museum in Warsaw, evening visitors could see whole exhibitions starting from ancient art to unique wall paintings and masterpieces of classical and 19th century painting.
It is a storage space, so these are objects that are not on display normally. So we let people to the places that are not available to the visitors normally. So this is a very special night for us.
Once a year, for already 25 years, hundreds of museums across Europe open their doors at the very time they're usually closed. The Long Night of Museums takes place every year around May 18th, when Worldwide International Museum Day is celebrated. The first such event was held in 1997 in Berlin. Since then, the idea has spread across Europe and turned into a cultural tradition.
And it's an annual thing, and we just really enjoy seeing art and being able to see the hidden gems and all of that.
This year in Poland, more than 300 institutions, from galleries to hidden archives, opened their doors to the public. We went to one of the capital's largest museums to ask people their opinion and ask why this tradition is so special.
Because it's free. Okay. It's free entry.
And it's a long queue, but it's worth it.
We came from Canada, but that's our second night. Last year we saw the Royal Castle, and it was great.
It's one night when museums stop being quiet and the archives of the past become more alive, more exciting, laying their secrets bare. It's only one day in the year, but it lasts long into the night.
Pivotal presidential elections not only in Poland, but also in Romania. For Bucharest, this means the second round of elections between anti-EU and nationalist populist candidate George Simeon and pro-EU candidate and Bucharest mayor Nicușor Dan, with preliminary exit polls indicating that it was Dan who won the election by 55%. Now joining us to explain what this election means for the future of Romania and its foreign policy is Oana Papascu, director at Global Focus Center. Hello and welcome to World News Tonight. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes. Now, actually, it wasn't long ago that George Simeon tweeted or put a post out on X that he was indeed the next Romanian president. So what's going on with these exit polls? Are these numbers to be trusted right now, or are we still kind of biting our nails?
Yeah, we're really dealing with quite a unique situation. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with the exit polls, rather with George Simeon. Both candidates have declared victory. And what we are expecting here is a Trump scenario of not recognizing the results of elections. Ever since this morning, I think, after 2 weeks in which we've seen Nicușor Dan close the huge gap that he had starting this 2 weeks ago after the first round with George Simeon. Ever since this morning, the polls indicated unprecedented moments.
Okay, it looks like we have. It looks like we've lost our guest, unfortunately, concerning these very important Romanian elections. I think we're going to try and reconnect, I hope, to try and see exactly whether we can continue this discussion or not. However, we were reporting that, according to the preliminary exit polls, 55% in favor of Nicușor Dan, a big upset compared to the first round of those Romanian presidential elections, which we saw just a couple weeks ago. So this could be a very interesting development. As our guest just mentioned, both candidates are currently claiming victory, and yet it's still, the polls just closed at about 8 p.m. tonight, so we're going to have to wait for official results before we're able to give a definitive answer as to who the next president of Romania is. Meanwhile, of course, the elections here in Poland, we're still under election silence, so we can't talk about that. But Romania, very important elections, if we all recall. Of course, back in December of last year, we had the first round of the presidential elections, which were actually nullified. They were considered void due to potential Russian meddling in those elections, to very much surprise to all. And of course, we just saw the first round of the redos, if you will, just 2 weeks ago. Now we have the second round tonight in Romania. And as our reporter, our Balkans correspondent, Pavel Trzaskowski reported to us earlier, actually, the preliminary results say 55% in favor of Dan, 45% in favor of Simeon. Which would make this, quite an upset if we look at the results before, which were actually very far off when it comes to Simeon taking the lead, having a very far lead over Nicușor Dan. Well, unfortunately, I believe we're not going to be able to make it back to our guest, but I do appreciate you all for joining us tonight here on World News. That concludes our episode, and please do stay tuned for the special edition of the special election coverage here on the Polish elections, starting in just a little while at 8:40 local time here in Poland. Well, that's all for me. I'm Don Arleth. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.